He'd been one of those fair babies that everybody took for a girl. Silvery fair curls he had, blue eyes, and a little freckle like a diamond on one side of his nose. The trouble she and Ethel had had to rear that child, the things out of newspapers they tried with him. Every Sunday morning Ethel would read aloud while Ma Parker did her washing. Dear Sir, just a line to let you know my little Myrtle was laid out for dead after 4 bottles, gained 8 pounds in 9 weeks, and is still putting it on. And then the egg cup of ink would come off the dresser and the letter would be written, and Ma would buy a postal order on her way to work next morning. But it was no use. Nothing made little Lenny put it on. Taking him to the cemetery even never gave him a colour. A nice shake-up in the bus never improved his appetite. But he was Gran's boy from the first. "Whose boy are you?" said old Ma Parker, straightening up from the stove and going over to the smudgy window. And a little voice, so warm, so close, it half stifled her, it seemed to be in her breast, under her heart, laughed out and said, "I'm Gran's boy." At that moment there was a sound of steps, and the literary gentleman appeared, dressed for walking. "Oh, Mrs. Parker, I'm going out." "Very good, sir. And you'll find your half-crown in the tray of the inkstand." "Thank you, sir." "Oh, by the way, Mrs. Parker," said the literary gentleman, quickly, "you didn't throw away any cocoa last time you were here, did you?" "No, sir." "Very strange. I could have sworn I left a teaspoonful of cocoa in the tin." He broke off. He said softly and firmly, "You'll always tell me when you throw things away, won't you, Mrs. Parker?" And he walked off, very pleased with himself, convinced, in fact, he'd shown Mrs. Parker that under his apparent carelessness he was as vigilant as a woman. The door banged. She took her brushes and cloths into the bedroom. But when she began to make the bed, smoothing, tucking, patting, the thought of little Lenny was unbearable. Why did he have to suffer so? That's what she couldn't understand. Why should a little angel child have to ask for his breath and fight for it? There was no sense in making a child suffer like that. From Lenny's little box of a chest there came a sound as though something was boiling. There was a great lump of something bubbling in his chest that he couldn't get rid of. When he coughed, the sweat sprang out on his head, his eyes bulged, his hands waved, and the great lump bubbled as a potato knocks in a saucepan. But what was more awful than all was when he didn't cough, he sat against the pillow and never spoke or answered, or even made as if he heard. Only he looked offended. "It's not your poor old Gran's doing it, my lovey," said old Ma Parker, patting back the damp hair from his little scarlet ears. But Lenny moved his head and edged away. Dreadfully offended with her he looked, and solemn. He bent his head and looked at her sideways, as though he couldn't have believed it of his Gran. But at last Ma Parker threw the counterpane over the bed. No, she simply couldn't think about it. It was too much. She had too much in her life to bear. She'd borne it up till now. She'd kept herself to herself, and never once had she been seen to cry. Never by a living soul. Not even her own children had seen Ma break down. She'd kept a proud face always. But now, Lenny gone, what had she? She had nothing. He was all she'd got from life, and now he was took too. Why must it all have happened to me? She wondered. "What have I done?" said old Ma Parker. "What have I done?" As she said those words she suddenly let fall of her brush. She found herself in the kitchen. Her misery was so terrible that she pinned on her hat, put on her jacket, and walked out of the flat like a person in a dream. She did not know what she was doing. She was like a person so dazed by the horror of what has happened that he walks away, anywhere, as though by walking away he could escape. It was cold in the street. There was a wind like ice. People went flitting by, very fast. The men walked like scissors. The women trod like cats. And nobody knew, nobody cared, even if she broke down. If at last, after all these years, she were to cry, she'd find herself in the lock-up as like as not. But at the thought of crying, it was as though little Lennie leapt in his gran's arms. Ah, that's what she wants to do, my dove. Gran wants to cry. If she could only cry now, cry for a long time, over everything, beginning with her first place and the cruel cook, going on to the doctors, and then the 7 little ones, death of her husband, the children's leaving her, and all the years of misery that led up to Lennie. But to have a proper cry over all these things would take a long time. All the same, the time for it had come. She must do it. She couldn't put it off any longer. She couldn't wait any more. Where could she go? She's had a hard life, has Ma Parker. Yes, a hard life indeed. Her chin began to tremble. There was no time to lose. But where? Where? She couldn't go home. Ethel was there. It would frighten Ethel out of her life. She couldn't sit on a bench anywhere. People would come asking her questions. She couldn't possibly go back to the gentleman's flat. She had no right to cry in strangers' houses. If she sat on some steps, a policeman would speak to her. Oh, wasn't there anywhere where she could hide and keep herself to herself and stay as long as she liked, not disturbing anybody, and nobody worrying her? Wasn't there anywhere in the world where she could have her cry out? At last, Ma Parker stood, looking up and down. The icy wind blew out her apron into a balloon, and now it began to rain. There was nowhere. End of story.